Just getting underway. Takuma Sato is the first out onto the track. But talking of that successful run for Arrows yesterday, Bruce Jones caught up a few moments ago with technical director there, Mike Coughlin.
Mike Coughlin, the strongest day we've seen from Arrows for a very long time yesterday. 2nd and 6th on the timesheets. Can you pull that off again today? And how much is down to parts that you've developed for the car?
I don't think we'll pull it off again today, but hopefully 2 in the top 10 would be nice. Maybe 2 in the top 12 is possible. And small upgrade from Cosworth and a new front wing. A significant step for the front wing, and the upgrade from Cosworth is specially suited to here.
Now you're on Bridgestones. Bridgestones seem to go very well on the Ferrari. Will they go as well again this morning? It's a lot colder than yesterday. Is that really going to affect you, or perhaps fall in your favour?
Yeah, I think it'll fall in our favour. I think history has shown that currently the Michelin is stronger when it's hotter, so hopefully it will fall in our favour.
We'll see. Thanks very much. Best of luck.
So interesting report from Arrows there, and that second fastest time for Frentzen. In fact, Bernoldi had the overall fastest first sector time yesterday. That's pretty impressive. Michael Schumacher, who set the outright pace, as you talked about earlier. Sure, they were running pretty light on fuel, but nonetheless very promising. And you have to say that the Bridgestone tyres and the Arrows car, a good combination this weekend. Peter, I think you have a little bit more on Arrows as well.
Yeah, just to add to what everybody's saying about that performance, speaking to a few people who should remain nameless, the car was certainly not empty of fuel yesterday either. It wasn't full, has to be said, but it certainly wasn't empty. It was probably about half tank, so an even more impressive performance than perhaps we all realised. Excellent stuff. So we'll just have to see where they end up in qualifying today, aiming, as we heard, for top 12, and that's got to be a possibility.
Well, Tom Walkinshaw told us, and when I put it to him, I said, Tom, was that a sponsored time your two cars have been doing? And somewhat indignantly he said, no, it wasn't. We had race fuel on board. Now, race fuel can vary from 80 kilograms of fuel down to about 20 kilograms of fuel. But certainly if they had fuel on board and enough that was more than just simply a single qualifying lap of a load of fuel, then that is even more impressive. And I mean, Mike Coughlin told us, confirmed what we were mentioning, that there were aerodynamic tweaks around the front wing. They say significant improvements plus an upgrade from Cosworth. Well, you know, I've always felt that Arrows could potentially be a very fast car. It's been an unreliable car, which has maybe precluded it showing its true potential and its true speed. And maybe here in Spain we're seeing the real clarity of what Arrows have been up to over the winter time.
So Michael Schumacher comes on to track now as this morning free practice session is well and truly underway. We've got a number of cars out there, including Ralf Schumacher, Giancarlo Fisichella, Juan Pablo Montoya not out there yet. He's sitting in the Williams pit garage currently. Let me just remind you what the times were yesterday. We saw Michael Schumacher fastest, Frentzen second. Jenson Button was the fastest of the Michelin runners. He was in 3rd place yesterday. Engine fired up down there in the Williams pit. Barrichello here, he was 4th fastest, so had a couple of cars between himself and team leader Michael Schumacher. Olivier Panis was extremely quick in 5th place, very happy with that. Bernoldi was 6th, Raikkonen fastest, McLaren in 7th, Fisichella 8th, Massa 9th, Trulli was 10th for Renault. Eddie Irvine was 11th, but John, once again, Eddie didn't seem to be too pleased about the performance of the Jaguar.
No, they were trying a variety of options and nothing really was clear. And Eddie on the radio, the pits radio, was saying, well, what are we going to do? It's 50% this way, 50% the other way. But just going back to the times from yesterday, Ben, I think it's quite interesting that Rubens Barrichello, who ended up 4th quickest, in fact, in the first part of practice on Friday, was 2nd quickest. His time stood. So he lost 2 places in that second 1-hour session. And an indication that Ferrari were prepared to sacrifice position in an unofficial practice session to gain information for the race. And that's what they're not worried about really being fastest or 2nd fastest. What they want is race information, and that's what Rubens Barrichello was doing for Ferrari yesterday afternoon.
Now, we heard a little bit earlier from the fact that Jaguars were struggling a bit. Bruce Jones has just caught up with Eddie Irvine. Let's hear from him.
Eddie Irvine looking very casual. The other cars are going out. You're standing here, not with your helmet on. How long are you going to wait?
We didn't change our engine last night, so there's no reason to do an installation lap. So we just wait until a couple of cars go out, clean the track a little bit, and then we go out.
Now, the team keeps talking of no real progress likely to be made until Silverstone, so you're just out there to do as well as you can until you get the right parts. But yesterday you put in one lap right at the end, 11th. Was that a real scruff of the neck lap, or is that something that shows some potential?
It doesn't show anything, to be honest. No, we had less fuel on than most of the people, and then after that I had a problem with the car, but no, we're not expecting to do anything until we're just basically doing a totally new aero package, so we just got to wait for that until that comes. We're just turning up at the races, really. There's nothing more to do.
Oh well, enjoy it as much as you can. Thanks, Eddie.
A very frustrating time for Jaguar. There is team boss Niki Lauda. There have been some changes, John, at the upper echelons of the Ford management in terms of who Niki now reports to, but that doesn't really change the situation they're in. They're just waiting for those aerodynamic developments to come through.
Yes, and they do take time to come through, and of course Jaguar now with their own dedicated wind tunnel down in Bicester, just close to the headquarters in Milton Keynes. But interestingly, an identical wind tunnel which is used by the BAR team is now about to be made redundant, because Jeff Willis, who has come from the Williams team, has said that wind tunnel is out of date, it's no good, you need to get a wind tunnel like Williams Grand Prix Engineering have got. So where that leaves Jaguar, I do not know. I mean, they've just acquired this wind tunnel, and already other engineers and other teams saying, oh, that technology is out of date, that's no good, we've got to be much further down the road. And let's hope the wind tunnel at least gives Jaguar some improvements by the time they get to Silverstone for the British Grand Prix. To see this team trailing around at the back of the grid is not what we expect from a name such a legend as Jaguar.
Absolutely right. Let's see what's going on here. Looking at Rubens Barrichello, who's just been out on circuit, the 2002 Ferrari. Looking, looks pretty neat and tidy. He came into the pits, a little bit of flame out. In fact, noticed that same was happening with Ralf Schumacher when he came into the pits a moment ago.
Yes, during that interview with Eddie Irvine, we saw on our screens a little bit of a flame out from the rear of Ralph's car. Now talking to Dr. Mario Tyson, who is of course responsible for the BMW V10 engine. So whether that was just maybe excess fuel that was burning in the exhaust pipes, sometimes of an engine, to put it crudely, the mixture of air and fuel in these cooler conditions, maybe there's more fuel going in, maybe the settings were not, let's say, optimized, and that was a residue of fuel in the exhaust system that was just burning off. Nothing to worry about, but the team will take it in and just check all the sensors to make sure that they're doing the job that they need to do to make the many engine changes that occur throughout an engine's lap.
Juan Pablo Montoya back out of the car once again, and we've not really seen anybody set a lap time as yet. Everybody's been out for an installation lap, but has come straight back in. And weather conditions somewhat different to what we saw this time yesterday.
Yes, that 82% humidity, I don't think it's going to relate to rain. It's a very heavy moisture-laden air. And of course, that is fantastic for downforce. When you've got humidity like that, you get tons of downforce. Again, when it gets hotter, the air gets less dense, and it's going to be a different situation. So teams will get probably slightly unusual readings today, which may not have any resemblance to what they'll have come qualifying, which starts at 1 o'clock, which is local time.
Yeah, so we're waiting for that heat to build up a little bit more, perhaps, as we go through the course of this morning. The 2 45-minute sessions of free practice this morning, remember, they don't count towards grid position at all, but they will allow the teams to prepare the cars for that session. New barge boards, slightly revised barge boards. That's that white thing you're looking at there on the side of the 2002 Ferrari. And you can see that sort of jagged edge design, and that's part of the modifications that have been made to the car.
Yes, it's not the sort of thing you want to get your leg trapped in. Those barge boards are very, very rigid items on the car. Whether they are rigidly attached is the issue that other teams were, of course, drawing to the attention of technical delegates all around the Imola circuit. They were concerned that they were seeing pictures of cars, and there appeared to be this impression that some of those body... He's walking up and down. He's been talking to BMW. He's now at Mercedes-Benz. What the differences in times are, they've got no real advantage. They've got a package which is not going to give them a particularly competitive weekend, and they're just sort of sitting it out, it seems.
You can see the higher humidity that we've got today. Just saw a little trace of those wing vortices, the little curling of the moisture in the air off the rear wing a second ago. We'll see more of that, I'm sure, when Alan McNish makes it onto the main straight. Great onboard pictures once again of this challenging track, very abrasive on the tyres, demanding for the drivers as well, with a variety of different types of bend. This is a challenging one, fast right-hander, and it's crucial to be quick out of this because it's a fairly long straight afterwards.
Yes, and second fastest part of the circuit, getting up to about 300 kilometres per hour, roughly about 180 miles an hour. Just watching McNish as he went round these middle or faster speed corners, the aerodynamics take over, but the lower speed corners just checking out to see how much understeer, and that was the fundamental problem I think all the Michelin runners were battling with on Friday.
Yes, none of the Michelin users seem to be happy with the balance of their car. Let's just see what McNish does as he comes across the line. He is fastest, but only 2 cars have set a time so far. Meanwhile, Peter's down in the pits with BMW engine boss Mario Tyson.
Mario, saw you having a quick chat there with Ralf Schumacher. What's the track like this morning in these colder ambient conditions?
Well, that was my question to him, but he told me I cannot say anything because on the installation lap you don't get the real feeling. You are just not quick enough. You are not trying to go to the limit, and so he doesn't know yet.
Fresh engine from yesterday?
Sure, fresh engine every day.
Looking back at Imola, it was an interesting race set, the difference between Ralf and Juan Pablo. What, 2 weeks on, can you give us a brief synopsis of how the performance of those two cars could be so different on the same day?
Well, basically both cars should have behaved in the same way, so the setup was quite similar. But Juan apparently was not happy with his first set of tires, and the third set again was different. So he just never got the car work right.
Now, this has been a McLaren circuit in the past. It's very different, obviously, in 2002. Where do you see BMW Williams this weekend relative to Ferrari?
Well, I don't expect us to be fighting for the top positions here, because on one hand, Ferrari has a superior car, apparently, where this is something which emerged from the Imola race.
Can I stop you there? A superior car or a superior package?
Well, it's a superior package, you're right, but the car basically is very good, apparently. On the other hand, all the Michelin teams are struggling a bit with the tire selection here, so I expect Ferrari at the top, and I hope we can be fighting for the places behind Ferrari.
Well, let's hope so. Let's hope you're racing with Ferrari on race day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. We're looking at Takuma Sato on track at the moment, and as ever, he's looking aggressive and committed. We saw Alan McNish run wide a moment or two ago, just up at this section of the track, but there is McNish just going through the shots, and Sato is fastest overall, but only 3 people have set a time so far.
Interestingly, Alan McNish actually, although he was quickest momentarily, Takuma Sato now has got that privilege, but McNish actually improved quite substantially on his time from Friday afternoon. So already we're seeing the teams have taken the fuel out, and immediately the times they drop. Takuma Sato has made a smaller improvement because he was actually 14th quickest with a 21.3. Right now he's done a 21.2 now, 21.219. So he's shaving tenths of seconds off. And remember, Sato had very, very few laps yesterday because he had all those problems. In total, only 20 laps, and he's now completed 25 laps over 2 days.
Yes, that's right. This man as well, Mika Salo, had problems yesterday. They had a power steering problem in the first session, and then they had an oil leak, and they had to change the back end of the car. He said he was amazed. They did it in 10 minutes. That's changing the whole back end of the car, taking it all off and putting a new back end. That's engine, gearbox, rear suspension, rear aerodynamics, all done in 10 minutes. Pretty impressive performance from Toyota.
Well, the team just continues to impress, and I think part of that is probably due to their experience as a rally team, a World Rally Championship team, where they are under great pressure to change gearboxes, clutches, differentials, and four-wheel drive rally cars. Very, very much it is necessary to be able to change those parts, get the car back, very limited downtimes. Eddie Irvine, first of the 2 Jaguars out and showing very quick speed in that second sector, 294 kilometers per hour, the quickest we've seen so far this morning.
Yes, he was fast on the straights yesterday as well. We saw, in fact, both him and De La Rosa very quick in a straight line, and Irvine currently is fastest at the speed trap, 308 kilometers per hour. We did crack the 320 kilometers per hour yesterday. It was Rubens Barrichello, and that is 200 miles per hour before getting onto the brakes at the first corner. So very high speed seen here in Barcelona. Now just climbing up the hill, Eddie Irvine has his teammate just ahead of him actually, John. And interestingly, of course, it's 1 year since Pedro was going rather slowly there.
And Eddie not very happy about that, because he came through La Camsa and really almost overran into the back of Pedro de la Rosa. Pedro on the racing line in the exit of the corner, Irvine at speed. And Eddie will probably say something, well, maybe to the team or maybe to Pedro at the end of this session.
I was just saying, 1 year since Pedro joined the Jaguar team, and certainly has quite a lot of support within the team, having done a very professional job throughout the testing and the racing. Didn't go too well for him here last year. He collided with Frentzen.
Good balance change, Eddie.
Listening in a little bit to the radio there with Jaguar. Meanwhile, Amy has caught up with Olivier Panis, who was fifth yesterday.
Olivier Panis, you're looking very relaxed and in no hurry to go out. What are you waiting for?
Well, we're waiting a little bit for the track, to be sure it's quite really clean, and we go out in about 5 minutes.
Now, yesterday you set the 5th fastest time. What can you attribute this to?
Well, you know, we work really hard, and the last test I worked really hard in Silverstone, and the car I feel some a little bit improvement, and all the racing we improve little bit step by step. This is a good point for the team. Everybody is very concentrated, and now the results start to arrive. This is a good point.
So your look's going to change for tomorrow?
Well, you know, I really want to make a good qualifying this afternoon and maybe take some point tomorrow.
Well, we've got a red flag on track at the moment. There's bits and pieces of debris on the track at the start-finish line, John.
Yeah, we just, as Enrique Bernoldi came across the line, suddenly, see, there's one of the Asia Techs, and let's have a look and see what happens. Oh, there, my goodness, I've never seen that. Front wing collapsed, literally, as the car came across. That's about 180 miles an hour, and that is one very, very scary moment for Mark Webber. I mean, to have that happen.
Wow, that is frightening indeed for Mark Webber, the Australian driver in the Minardi, and he slowed right down, and thankfully it happened on a dead straight piece of road on the main straight, and well, very scary indeed for them. But Mark survived the moment, of course. Remember, John, a few years ago he had that even more frightening flip in a Mercedes at Le Mans. I'm glad it didn't do that, but it's still a nasty incident there.
Yes, it is, and also cars coming past, and Bernoldi, I think, was the next car up, and we were watching the screen during that interview, and we could see, where's the debris coming from? And Bernoldi comes up and goes through it. Immediately the race director threw the red light. Everything has been halted. All those bits of carbon fibre now will be removed from the track. Let's look again. You're picking 150 miles an hour on the exit. By the time you get to the start line, which we see, that's the front of those two lines, there the front wing suddenly just collapses under. Now that is a moment at which every racing driver fears. I had something very similar happen to me when I was testing the Tag Porsche the first time I'd ever ran at Weissach. The front of the car got up in the air, the wheels were clear by maybe about 6 inches. Here's the onboard camera view of that situation. Here it goes now. Oh no, it's the next line we're waiting for. That was the back of the grid. It's about to go now. Watch the wheels as they come airwards, up in the air. There she goes. Mark's head, he must wonder, what am I going to do? Imagine that car had it continued to go up in the air. Well,
yes, that could have been very, very frightening indeed. Frightening enough as it was, losing the front wing there. And the team rushing to have a look at the front of that car. This car has actually run incredibly reliably throughout the season, and Mark Webber has completed more laps than anybody except Michael Schumacher and Juan Pablo Montoya this year. So they've had great reliability with that team, but something very strange has occurred there. And well, you can see Bernoldi had just set the fastest time just before that incident by a full second from Takuma Sato. So once again the arrows going very quickly this morning, but all attention focused on the Australian Mark Webber as he climbs out of the Minardi without a front wing now.
Well, no doubt the team will want to look at that, because it's a very rare occurrence to see a front wing collapse completely like that. We have seen rear wings on some occasions come off cars, and that's probably been partly due to the harmonics, the vibrations that modern engines revving up to 18,000 RPM can generate. But to see a front wing just completely collapse and fold under the car like that, first of all, it's a very scary moment for the driver, but scary just the potential that could occur. As a Formula 1 car, like any car, once the front of the car gets airborne, the air going under the car will just, it's a bit like a kite, literally just can take the car up, and goodness knows, we saw what happened in Australia. That was a more extreme version, of course, with Ralf Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello. And there the Minardi team are putting the garage doors down. They do not want cameras intruding in and seeing what may have caused that incident for Mark Webber. Fortunately, Mark was able to drive back to the pits, and around all the marshals on the circuit brushing up. There's another view again. Just suddenly the whole thing just collapses down. Now, I just wonder, had the team dialed in any more front-end downforce, and was that just the straw that broke the wing supports back?
Incredible though, because it wasn't as if he was at very high speed there, but he would be building up more speed going down the straight, so it wasn't the point of maximum downforce. That would be a little further down the straight. Perhaps the front wing would have got damaged on a curb or something like that, or maybe he touched something. But there you can see some of the debris that the marshals have managed to collect from the track there, and certainly a very frightening incident for Mark Webber.
Well, the track very quickly cleaned up, and any of the shards of carbon fibre that may have been distributed when that wing collapsed have now been removed. It's very important indeed that any hint of carbon fibre, because it is absolutely, it's like glass. If it touches a tyre, it slices through it. So line 23 will be reopened.
Just a few moments time. Now, we were talking about Ferrari and how they've made one or two little changes to the aerodynamics on their car. The barge board are slightly different. You can see that sort of sawtooth arrangement on the bottom ledge of the barge board, and there we can see on the diagram again that white barge board area, that sweeping curving piece of the Ferrari, which has now got this jagged edge to it. Now, these are fairly crucial parts of the front aerodynamics of the car, John. Controlling the airflow around the front suspension, and suitably enough through the side pods, the cooling, all that is part of what the barge board does.
Yeah, basically it directs the air the way that the engineers feel it's going to be most productive to the performance of the car. And because aerodynamics are so key to the performance of a car, it starts at the front wing, but it continues all the way. And these revised sawtooth barge boards are very interesting.
Well, it's always fun to see the little bits and pieces that are different on the Formula 1 cars. Every Grand Prix that we go to, we see something extra different come out on the cars, and the aerodynamics are a crucial part of the setup here in Barcelona. Another quick look at the replay of that front wing collapsing, and well, it just off the ground briefly and then back down again. Now, I believe that Matt has managed to catch up with David Coulthard. Matt.
David, not the best of first days for you. Things looking any brighter today?
Well, as I explained when I was grabbed walking past the booth here to say a few words, I haven't been on the track yet, well, other than doing installation laps, so a bit early for me to know exactly what our form's going to be, but I don't think that the actual position we're in yesterday is a true reflection, because we didn't do any performance running. Don't expect that we're going to be quick enough to challenge for the pole, but nonetheless I think that we have a reasonable chance of improving in where we were on the grid in Imola.
I don't know if you got a chance to see the incident which has closed the track. From this angle it looked pretty frightening.
Yeah, absolutely. The Minardi riding up over its front wing, it's never a pleasant view. You know, we've seen cars in the past actually, once they get a certain height on the nose, can actually pull a backflip. So I would imagine that Mark Webber will be coming in for a new front wing and probably a change of underpants.
And back to you, David. Your hopes for the race?
Really just to build on the 1 point I managed to achieve in Imola and try and move forward from there. You know, there's no point setting the sights too high until we can actually find out just exactly what performance is going to be.
Okay, good luck today and indeed the rest of the weekend.
Thanks.
Well, Alan McNish is just down at the end of the pit lane. He did a practice start, I think, coming out on the engine has stalled or some electronic glitch has prevented him from continuing out of the pit lane, and that's a bit of a blow to him. Unless they can somehow get that car back up to the garage, then that could be the end of the session for Allan McNish.
I'm not quite sure whether they can do that or not, because he technically was on the racetrack at the time he did it, and the car's now been pushed behind the barrier, so it may mean that the team have now got to wait. And Uwe Andersson's face, you can see the concern in his face that they would like to get that car back and get it to first find out what the problem was. Was it simply just finger problem with Allan, or was it actually something more substantial there? The car pulled back, and the team, I'm not sure whether they're allowed or going to be allowed to work on it. It appears that they are going to be allowed to bring it back to the pit lane and in fact back to the Toyota garage, but since they are the last garage in the pit lane, the first garages, of course, I think are going to be for Ferrari. So it looks like Toyota probably, it's just literally a simple push of the car back into the garage. It's a bit of good fortune for Allan McNish. Now, whether he'll be allowed to take part in the rest of this session, again, we wait to see.
So McNish hoping to try and get the balance a little improved on that car. At the moment he's done a reasonable time, but that's because so few cars have actually set a pace so far. 6 cars have set a fast lap. Eddie Irvine 6th, Enrique Vinaldi fastest of those that have been out in this morning free practice session. 2 45-minute sessions, a split of half an hour in between, not much time to make changes to the cars. And there is Eddie Irvine on track now in the Jaguar. Now flicking it through the first couple of corners. This is the long sweeping right-hander called Renault, and he comes out of there not running too wide, short straight up into the right-hander at Repsol. Opens out a little bit on them, this one, a little faster than it looks initially on turn in, and then down to this downhill hairpin, and that's where we've seen quite a lot of lock-ups on the way in here.
Yes, it's not unusual to see Eddie with that inside wheel locked up, although he's braking late and heavily, but he always tends to have a car where when the unloaded wheel is unloaded as it is turning in to the Seat corner, there's no suspension movement. He's got the front of the car fairly stiff, and that's the consequence of the lockup. But Eddie, the car, I must say, looks better today, and I think because track conditions have improved, and probably not least of all as well because there's a lot more dense air around, which will generate more downforce, and that's been the basic bugbear of this Jaguar R3 all year.
Yes, the conditions may suit them a little better. There we are, back to full racing speed. This is the last couple of corners that he's coming through now, this fast sweeping right-hander that leads back onto the start-finish straight, and that puts him 5th fastest. A few more cars out on track, including his teammate Pedro de la Rosa. Jacques Villeneuve is also on track. You just saw him crossing the line a little behind Eddie, as we now ride on board with him, looking over his left shoulder. And now we're into that long right-hander we talked about a second ago, and onto the short straight to Repsol.
And you could just hear how much he's having to hold back on the throttle. He wasn't able to keep the throttle constant. He's having to come back out of it. That's to check the front of the car to make sure that the front end, which is not giving him as much grip as he likes, isn't going to run out too wide too early in that corner. And frustration always for a driver when you're having to check the throttle.
Inside the McLaren pits at the moment, and just looking at the cameras that are around, we've got this stationary fixed camera in the McLaren pits as well, and we can look down and see what's going on as they get him ready to come out. But on track now is Michael Schumacher, winner here last year. If you remember, he inherited the lead on the very last lap when Mika Hakkinen broke down with the clutch problem.
We're just trying on that onboard shot. I thought we might get a chance to hear the different throttle positions of Michael Schumacher vis-a-vis Eddie Irvine, but clearly different cars, different level of performance, and Michael Schumacher already blitzing the previous fastest first sector time by 0.3 of a second.
Yep, working the steering a bit into the downhill hairpin. Now let's ride on board and see how much work is actually going on inside the cockpit on that steering wheel. Coming up to the right-hander here, the fast one at Kampsa. Uses all the road, as everybody does, to maintain speed. And again, you can see those little wing vortices coming off, the moisture in the air, giving an idea of the increased humidity here today.
Well, it looks very, very good for Michael Schumacher, almost a second up on Benoldi at that second split time, and that will clearly see the quickest lap we have seen of all weekend as he comes through these final curves onto pit straight into turn 13. Whoa, yeah, I mean, really the back end just dancing, bringing the car straight. 1:18.4, and that's almost 0.2 of a second away from pole last year on Michael's first flying lap. of Saturday free practice. Now I think right now the track is probably quite fast for Michael to be able to go out and do a time like that. Nevertheless, that's a warning marker for everybody in the pit lane.
That's a stunning lap, isn't it? Straight out there, a 1:18.4, as you say, John, very close to last year's pole, which was set by Michael himself at a 1:18.2. So it looks as though we're set for some fast lap times here today. That's good news. But can anybody take the battle to Ferrari? Let's watch Fisichella, also on the Bridgestone tyres, and he was running well yesterday. Looks as though this is a pretty committed lap as well. As he comes across the line, he goes fourth fastest, a 1:20.4. That's almost exactly 2 seconds per lap slower than Michael Schumacher's just done.
Yes, but also on the track, we're looking at Nick Heidfeld on the timing screens. That's on channel 5 of your TV, and we're looking back into the Jordan team. But Nick Heidfeld, well, he's gone second quickest as we were talking. Heidfeld now 1:19.804. Jordan team, well, they're not unhappy with things, but they need to find a lot of time to get anywhere near what we've seen from Nick Heidfeld. Similar basic package in terms of Bridgestone tyres, but clearly an advantage in horsepower with that Ferrari-based engine.
Now let's watch Ralf Schumacher, because he's also on a reasonably good lap here. You can see his split though, 0.7 of a second down on Michael Schumacher's. This is a quickish lap from Ralf, but it might just show us that Williams really are not going to be in that battle. It's so hard to tell, we don't know how. Oh, and a spin for Takuma Sato.
Yes, up at Campson, just a really scary moment because Kimi Raikkonen was coming around in the McLaren, but we have to see Ralf Schumacher go second quickest, a second slower than his brother, and some 4/10 quicker than Nick Heidfeld in third place.
Okay, Taki, what's the problem?
Let's take a look at the replay and see on the exit. There he comes into view, backwards already. Now watch for Raikkonen coming through the shots. There he is.
I think Raikkonen had enough warning because he'd have certainly seen something go wayward, because I think Sato lost the car at the point of turning in rather than on the exit of the corner, so he would have been out of the throttle. But nevertheless, you never know where that spinning car is going to go, whether it's going to go right or left. So you have to be prepared to take evasive action pretty rapidly.
Montoya on a quickish lap, but as you saw from the split, over a second down already on Michael Schumacher's time. And they are putting in some quick laps, but it does look at the moment as though Ferrari maintaining that great form that we've seen for the new car. Across the line, fifth fastest for Juan Pablo Montoya. So Michael Schumacher.
P5 at the moment. Michael is on 18.4. Ralph is 19.4.
And that's Juan Pablo getting the information about what everyone else is up to. Here's Jenson Button, fastest of the Michelin tyre users yesterday. And you can see that he's just under a second slower than Michael at that second split point.
But further around the circuit, Kimi Raikkonen also on a pretty fast lap. He's running behind Jenson Button, but a corner behind as Button comes through the final turn 13. He's going to put himself probably in somewhere in the top 6, but nowhere as quick in terms of the rest of the field as yesterday.
That puts Jenson Button third again here, and in fact no, only for a second, because Kimi Raikkonen has just crossed the line, and it's Raikkonen who's just Can he maintain that sort of pace up to the second one? 54.246 is the mark. Yes, indeed. Barrichello is faster. Now, while he's on a good lap, we've got the opportunity to go straight down, talk to Mark Webber, who's with Peter Windsor.
To a very calm and collected looking Mark Webber. Anyway, Mark, that was a very nasty moment. Replay yet on Sky Digital?
Yeah, I have. Nice slow-mo, so we can have a look at actually went wrong. But we've actually got two noses here, so now we're not going to run that nose obviously anymore. But still driving back to the pits, there was still a little bit of damage done, so the guys are still now having a really good look at what actually went down. Obviously something's failed, but we should be safe for the rest of the weekend. It's no problem. We'll go back to the other one.
Is that the nose spec you ran yesterday?
Yes, it is, yeah. So a little bit of a surprise, but when everything's on the limit, mate, you know what it's like. So we're trying to, yeah, but it was a shame.
A little bit of deja vu for you as well. Don't really want to think about it, I guess.
Yeah, no, it was a similar feeling initially. I thought, this is not very good. So really strange. I didn't feel, looking at the replay, I didn't realise the car went up that high, but I just felt, you know, that the car, for sure something happened in the front, and I thought I've lost a lot of pressure, and the front, you know, come up a little bit. I didn't realise it come up that high. So yeah, it's not pretty for Formula 1 guys to have that. So the rear wing is as crucial for us. So well, even worse probably. But yeah, it's the guys will get to the bottom of it.
Okay, well, very best of luck and keep safe.
Yeah, thanks. Cheers.
Cheers.
Full start. The session just had to be stopped. Mark Webber shed a front wing. Did he hit a curb or did it come off on his own?
Unfortunately, as you've probably seen on the replay, he dragged the evidence all the way around the track. So we're trying now to have a look to see exactly what happened. We think it was something like a curbing, but we want to be absolutely sure. So we're very lucky in so much as that we've got two different types of wings here this weekend. So until we're absolutely certain what happened, we've withdrawn that wing from both cars and we'll run with the other wing. So safety precaution.
So Mark will be out before the session's over again?
No, not in this session because it's actually done quite a bit of damage underneath the car, but he'll be out in the next session, and hopefully by then we'll have the rest of our pieces back and find out exactly what happened.
Best of luck. Thanks for talking to us.
So Mark Webber surviving that incident, but John, just a moment ago we saw another very impressive Ferrari lap, but this time it was for Rubens Barrichello. He's gone fastest on a 1 minute 18.048, which is underneath last year's pole time.
Yes, and again the Ferrari just looks stunning. I mean, both drivers were able just to place the car any part of the circuit they like. The car responds, the front bites, the rear follows, it doesn't do anything silly. Only a Michael Schumacher on that lap, we saw him just let the back drift out, going on to start finish straight. But the Ferrari in the Bridgestone package is just so dominant. I mean, currently Barrichello on an 18.048. The next car outside of a Ferrari is Coulthard in third place, 1 second slower in the McLaren with the Michelin tyre.
Well, we're watching Olivier Panis, who had a good run yesterday, 5th fastest, and said that he was very happy with the handling of this car. Let's just watch him. Oh, locks up the left front, but does he keep it tidy? Lost a little bit of time there, I would say. Now towards a fairly tight left-hander, turn 7 up the hill, and then the quick, very high commitment corner, the right-hander coming up. It looks pretty good through there. Nice neutral balance.
Yes, I mean the Bridgestone tyre seems to have a much better sort of connection with the racetrack that enables the team to find a balance, lets the driver do his job. Panis very happy with his 5th place from Friday practice, and certainly got personal bests in the first sector. Not a personal best in terms of time, but he had in terms of speed in the second, and now coming through these final corners to complete into turn 13. Well, plenty of commitment there.
Yeah, he looks very strong indeed. Let's see where this puts him.
Stays the same?
He stays the same, in fact, 10th place, so maybe those tyres have done a few laps now, so that doesn't see any improvement in time, but the car does look very drivable, and that will give him confidence. He's still looking for his first finish of the season this weekend at the Spanish Grand Prix.
Again, we see into the Seat corner. That's the one that Irvine was dragging his wheel into, and it's again the same with Olivier Panis. The unloaded inside wheel with your heavy braking. There's so little suspension droop on these cars that it'll just very easily lock up.
But of course that tyre, John, that one that gets locked up into that corner is the one that's just done a huge amount of work on the two previous right-handers, isn't it?
Yes, you think it might get a bit of relief, but it doesn't, because if it doesn't get the load from the cornering in a right-hand corner, it's getting the load from being locked up, and of course the danger is that if you lock them too heavily, that wasn't particularly serious, but you can flat spot a tyre, and with only 7 sets of tyres available from this morning on to the end of the Grand Prix, you cannot afford to throw away 1 set of tyres.
Now why, in that situation, John, sometimes we see people flat spotting a tyre, sometimes it can only be a very short lock-up, and that causes a vibration, a flat spot, which so much vibration through the steering that they can't continue. Why locking up that much into that corner, why doesn't that cause a flat spot like that?
Well, it can cause a flat spot, but it's not like you've suddenly locked up both front wheels in an emergency stopping. That is just the wheel is dragging, so it's lightly locked as opposed to heavily locked.
Probably handle a little bit more front wing if it is, could we?
Yeah, so you could.
Listening to a little bit of radio there, but we've got the opportunity to speak to Jean Todt of Ferrari. Jean, can you hear us okay? Jean Todt, can you hear us? Hopefully you got the headsets on. We'll just try once more. Jean Todt, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I mean, unfortunately, I hear you since 5 minutes.
Ah, right, now we hear you. I'm sorry about that. So, very impressive performance from both cars this morning. Are the weather conditions particularly suitable for the Bridgestone tyres and for the Ferrari package today?
Well, I mean, definitely, package seems performing well so far. Tyres are very suitable for us, but other teams using Bridgestone. We did a lot of testing here privately as all the other teams, and I mean, we are looking forward to do a good qualifying and hopefully a good race.
Tell us about Rubens this year. He seems to be very fired up. We've seen a stunning lap from Barrichello this morning. Has his attitude changed at all this year?
I mean, change. You know, we're happy with Rubens. Definitely feels more comfortable with the team. He's happy the way the car behaves. He's happy about the technical support he has around him. I think it's quite rewarding for a driver to be with a team which is competitive and which is giving him so much support. So I mean, definitely feels happy and more comfortable.
Great, well, it's been a brilliant performance so far from Ferrari. Jean, thank you very much for joining us this morning, and good luck in qualifying this afternoon. So, a few little problems with the sound there, but great opportunity here, John, on Digital F1. We talked to all the top people in motorsport, and he was on the pit lane wall when we were speaking to him there, so that's part of the reason that it's quite hard to hear him.
Well, and there's so much radio traffic takes place on the pit lane, the team to garage, and I mean, it's just drivers to the pit lane, drivers to the... It just goes on and on, so a great opportunity to speak to Jean Todt while both Ferrari drivers are back in the garage. They're probably looking through bits of telemetry and deciding what way they want to go. They've now just 7.5 minutes of this session remaining, and I'm now riding with Jacques Villeneuve.
Yeah, Jacques Villeneuve, who finished third here last year. It was a good race from him in the BAR Honda, and of course Honda Power once again here. Honda still looking for some points this year from either of their teams, BAR or Jordan. There was an interesting press conference yesterday, John. Some of the top engineers in Formula One, Ross Brawn, Adrian Newey, Mike Gascoigne were all there. And Ross was, well, they were all asked about Honda's performance, why they're not being as successful as they were some years ago in Formula One. And Ross very much made the point that perhaps they should just concentrate on one team.
Yes, I think the point he was making is instead of being what he described as an engine supplier to two teams, they should actually become much more of a partner to a soulless team, a single car team. And he knows how good Honda are because he was around and Honda were dominating in Formula One in the 80s and in the early 90s. So clearly words of wisdom from Ross Brawn, but not necessarily music to the ears of either of the Honda teams that BAR here on camera or with the Jordan team. And we had a talk about that in the pre-show piece with discussions where Eddie Jordan might be looking in part of the rationalisation. In fact, BAR also had a rationalisation earlier in the year. Both teams slimming down, leaning up, and whether Honda decide to continue with the two teams. Of course, Jordan has a contract with Honda for next year, and there's been an extension for BAR. What that outcome will be, well, we will probably not know until later in the season.
And in fact, we'll talk more about that whole Honda situation when we get into our qualifying programme later on today. So do stay with us on F1 Digital throughout the day. All the news, all the action from Barcelona, and we're riding at the moment on board with Jenson Button.
Well, improvements in the middle sector for Button, but no improvement in position, but a marginal improvement in time. He still remains 8th quickest, directly behind Kimi Raikkonen. And looking down, as David Coulthard currently is the fastest Michelin runner. As we look at the Scotsman, I think Coulthard has just come into the pits, so his time still stands as the fastest Michelin time, but that time, well, he's not going out of the pits, thanks David for that. His quickest time is a second slower than that of Rubens Barrichello, who is by far and away the quickest car so far we've seen this morning.
I'm braking very early.
A little bit of pits radio there from Jarno Trulli, and you can see Kimi Raikkonen, the car moving around quite a lot again. We saw Coulthard really fighting his McLaren yesterday, something we're not particularly accustomed to seeing a McLaren do around Barcelona, and that's not respond to driver input particularly well. In the past, the McLarens have ruled the roost in terms of performance here. 3 1-2 finishes in recent years, but yesterday they were struggling. Raikkonen himself is on a fairly good lap at the moment, currently quite, let's just say, where is he, 7th fastest. This lap I don't think will be actually any improvement on that.
But I think what's quite impressive is Kimi Raikkonen in 7th place. Behind him is Jenson Button. The Button's just gone into the pits, but he had done in those first 2 sectors his personal best, and that's on a set of tyres that had done quite a long run. So clearly Renault engineers are working very well, and Jenson Button getting the most out of that Renault chassis on a set of tyres that probably has done, well, the thin end of about 8 to 10 laps now in this session.
I have to say that looking at the way the Ferrari is going at the moment, the battle in this Spanish Grand Prix is all set to be again the battle between McLaren and Renault, perhaps even Williams. If they don't get their act together a little more, they might be challenged by McLaren and Renault this time. Williams have always said this is not one of their best tracks.
Watching Michael away, Ferrari into La Caixa may give us some clue as to what he was doing yesterday when you saw him offline doing power slides. He threw the car in there almost, again I refer to it as being dirt tracking, to try and get the back end to make the corner a tighter exit, rather than having to battle with maybe a front end that wouldn't quite give him the confidence to open the throttle. So interesting to see what Schumacher's doing.
He's just done an 18.4, which is slightly better than his previous best, but the important thing, he's just set the new fastest time through the final sector, so that looked very quick indeed. Montoya across the line, a full 1.5 seconds slower than the Ferrari of Rubens Barrichello, and there is Barrichello now, and he's just set a new fastest first sector. A little bit slower on the second sector. Let's see where this puts him overall with the time. Actually, it's a slower time. He lost time on those next 2 sectors.
Yeah, not sure. Pedro de la Rosa and the Jaguar is just ahead of him, and I'm not quite sure whether he just backed off or, you know, he's talking to the team. They may say, no, wait. The fact is, it's the sector times that teams are looking at. They will relate that to any car changes that have been made. They know that they're confident the overall lap time may have been an improvement, so they're not concerned at this point if they didn't reflect that in the times. And there we see a famous former Grand Prix driver, Jean Alesi, who last weekend raced in the DTM, the opening round of the DTM for Mercedes-Benz.
Yes, and got a podium finish. Great effort for Jean Alesi, and a huge crowd gathered to watch him there, of course, as well. And well, we've seen Barrichello had a very quick first sector time, and then he was slowed down somehow rather. Peter, did you have some idea of what caused that?
Well, Ben, I can only surmise it was the slower car in front, because yesterday, you recall, Felipe Massa had a big moment when he caught Heinz-Harald Frentzen, I think it was, on a quick corner. I spoke to him later. He said that the effect of the turbulence from the car in front was unbelievable. He just suddenly lost front downforce. And I think the gap we saw there, Barrichello riding behind, I think it was De La Rosa, was about as near as they can run comfortably on this circuit. A lot of drivers talking about how much downforce they're losing because of the car in front.
Right, yes, it's such an aerodynamically controlled track in a way, this one, isn't it, John? The downforce that is created is so crucial to high performance around this one.
It is. It's very much an aerodynamic racetrack, and well, I wasn't quite certain that Barrichello was close enough to have a major effect on his front end downforce. I suspect that the car ahead of him did come into play it would be something that Barrichello would judge himself. He might just back off the throttle rather than actually having to confront the situation, and that would have accounted for that loss of time in the last sector.
Looks like another back end of the Toyota being changed there. They did that in 10 minutes yesterday, as we mentioned earlier on. Peter, you've got some news from just outside the Williams garage, I gather.
Yes, I have indeed, Ben, where Juan Pablo Montoya has just come in at the end of his run, and yet another quick squirt by Mustard, he's known, the mechanic here, with the fire extinguisher on the front brakes. We've just got some radio coming in, indeed, from the Montoya car. And yet again, some brake problems there. You'll probably find, as in Imola though, that Williams already running a qualifying spec on the brakes, so it's very, very temperature critical. You can see a mechanic there holding a fan right inside the duct there. Not a circuit that's particularly hard on brakes, not known to be a problem for brakes, but as ever, running right on the limit.
Peter, I think Williams have been experimenting with that new kind of brake duct design, haven't they? The sort of barrel duct rather than the straightforward open duct that we've seen in the past on those cars.
Well, that's right. Yes, they've actually been running that since Melbourne, but you can see a very good picture of it there. You can see a mechanic looking now to see if there's any sort of rubber build-up from the tyre inside the brake there. That's one of the reasons that they do have these little small fires, and nothing really to get worried about. And of course the other factor we often see on the Williams is how much brake dust they throw out when they hit the brakes. Ralph usually throws out more than Montoya because he says he hits the brake pedal perhaps a little bit harder, but not sure Juan Pablo would agree with that.